So I'd like to begin this evening by asking a question, and the question is, what do space travel, sex, death, and the afterlife have in common? The answer, of course, a lot of fans out there. The answer, of course, is they're all subjects addressed in previous books by Mary Roach. As anyone familiar with her work knows, Mary has shown a real knack for delving into complex subjects and writing about them, both with a depth and a clarity that make the subjects accessible to many readers. Large doses of humor also help, and Mary can, of course, be very amusing. All these traits are very much in evidence. It's a risk here doing this, standing right next to her. All these traits are very much in evidence in her latest book, Grunt, The Curious Science of Humans at War, which, as the subtitle suggests, is about how the military prepares troops to deal with such combat challenges as exhaustion, heat, panic, noise, boredom, and a number of others. Although Mary does have a tendency to gravitate toward scientific topics, she doesn't have a formal background in science. She just finds science stories very, very interesting. If most of her books have a common focus, it's the human body, or as she herself has put it, human bodies in unusual circumstances. Asked once by Peter Sagal of NPR how she picks her topics, Mary replied, "Well, it's got to have a little science, it's got to have a little history, a little humor, and something gross." There is some gross stuff in Grunt, some stuff that's a little, shall we say, below the belt. But overwhelmingly, the book is very, very informative and entertaining. Mary will be in conversation here this evening with Terry Monmaney, who's the deputy editor at Smithsonian Magazine. So please join me in welcoming both.
Hi, Mary.
Hi, Terry.
Is this on? That's on, right?
Hello.
Okay, good.
Hello?
Yes. Hi,
Yeah.
Mary.
Is this on?
Right.
Okay, good.
All right. Mary and I have known each other a long time, off and on, for a while now, and I want to put to you a question that I know everybody in America is asking right now. Can you get me tickets to Hamilton?
Forget it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Grunt is about the kind of defensive side of military science, as it were. It's not about ballistics and weaponry. It's about what happens to troops and what to do about it and what to learn about it. Where did you get that idea?
I got that idea reporting a story for Smithsonian Magazine, a fine publication.
Yes.
Published right here. No, this is true. No, I was reporting for the food issue. I was in India, in Nagaland, where the Boot Jolokia, the hottest chili pepper in the world, grows, and there was a chili pepper eating contest, which is quite a brutal eating contest. People taken away in ambulances. Anyway, but while I was there, someone said, you know, this chili pepper, the military, the Indian Defense Ministry, weaponized it. They made a kind of a tear gas bomb out of this pepper, and so I thought, well, I better go investigate that. I ended up going to the neighboring state of Assam, the science branch of the Indian Defense Ministry, and hanging around there and making a pest of myself. The pepper bomb, it turned out, was never deployed because it is prone to mildew, and so that was but while I was there, they were working on a leech repellent, and it was this. They were describing, well, when the rainy season comes, we'll go down to the river and we'll roll up our trousers and test these different leech repellents. And I remember just thinking, leech repellent is a very Mary Roach thing. I was like, that's, and I thought, how can I really I want to cover this, and then I started thinking maybe military science is a little more esoteric than I had previously thought, and a little more interesting and a little more roachable. So that's what led me down that path.
And truth is, I did not know that until Mary just mentioned that the other day, that she'll be sending royalty checks to me now because of that story assignment that we gave her. So I'll
Thank
be
you
giving
very
you
much.
I'll be
Thank
giving-
you very much, Terry.
Yeah. So, of course, everyone marvels at your ability to find these amazing subjects and to find the humanity and the complexity inside those subjects. So, for example, in this book, you find yourself observing scientists, and I use the term maybe loosely in this case, who've attached used tampons to the end of fish hooks and have cast these in front of bears.
Yeah.
Why?
Wow, you dove in with a really specific and
why
unusual.
not?
Okay, all
Why
right.
not?
All right, this is in a shark repellent chapter. Okay, this is in a chapter that had to do with the OSS and the Navy's efforts to come up with a way to keep aviators and sailors safe if they end up in the water. And so the Navy later, after they realized the shark repellent thing, it's not going to, a chemical in an ocean is going to dilute. By the time the shark from over there comes to you, your shark repellent will have diluted to the point, wherever it is, where it's just not going to. And anyway, so the Navy thought, well, we need to understand more about sharks and what repels them and what attracts them. Like maybe the answer is not to have a repellent, but to not attract them in the first place. So they looked into, they realized this whole series of, does sweat attract them? Does urine attract them? And the researchers they were actually sponging themselves off and then squeezing their own sweat into this tank with sharks. It was an ongoing project that the Office of Navy Research was doing. Anyway, the blood issue is how we get to bears. This is the farthest sidetrack from the military that's in the book that you've chosen to start with. But thank you, because no one else has asked about that. But the
They're going to read it, so I mean, I don't have.
yeah. So there was this. There were some campers who were attacked in a national park, and one of them was menstruating, and so there was this fear that the blood had attracted the bears. So in order to investigate this, the researchers, the National Forest Service or wherever they were, researchers, and somebody had some fly fishing chops because they put the used tampon, and you brought this up, onto, and they spin cast it out to they were at a dump, and bears were foraging, and they were good because they landed that thing, as fly fishermen will do. Yeah. They landed that thing and then pulled it back past the bears, and the bears ignored it. These were brown bears. Polar bears, on the other hand, polar bears will actually, and this research has been done too, polar bears will devour a used tampon on a steak, and this has been done too. And there's more to say about this, but but I think we're going to let you read it, because we're going off into a...
Okay. I just thought that was an interesting example of the kinds of things that Mary brings to the surface for those of us who love Mary.
Yeah.
Now, in the course of writing this book, you went to a lot of different places.
Yes.
And you went, as I counted, you went to Georgia, Maryland. You came to Washington and didn't call me. You went to Djibouti. You went to California. You went to Connecticut. You not only observed, but you took part in experiments that various military scientists were doing. And you found yourself at the Army Ranger School in Georgia, taking part in an experiment. Can you tell us about that experiment and what happened?
Yeah, sure. Actually, there were Army Ranger instructors, but they were up at USS, the Uniformed Services, University of the Health Sciences. Well, that flows off my tongue now. For a long time, I'd go, University of Health, Uniformed, anyway, so now I have it. I was at USS, and specifically the Consortium for Health and Military Performance, and they have a cook box, and that is they're studying heat stroke, heat injury, and heat illness. Heat stroke being the far and often deadly extreme of heat injury. And they were trying to figure out, is there a way we could identify individuals who are prone to heat illness? Because there's a lot of individual variation in how you can cope with extreme heat. So the cook box, you go in, they adjust the temperature, the humidity. There's treadmills in there. They put a pack on you. And so that there were 2 Army Ranger instructors, the fittest individuals I have ever seen in my life, and then me, and me on the other treadmill. And they put a pack on me that weighed 30 pounds, which is like a pocketbook for an Army Ranger instructor. It's nothing. And I lasted 7 minutes. 7 minutes. And these guys were just, I said, how are you guys after my pack had been taken off? And I said, so how are you guys doing? And one of them said, I'm bored. And the other guy said, yeah, we're going to go do a real workout after this.
Right.
They're going to go do some CrossFit after this.
Right.
So anyway, but it was a very intense demonstration of what it is like to carry a heavy load in an environment that is very hot when you are exerting yourself. And that's when you get into trouble, because that sets up this competition. You've got, your body wants to send the blood to the muscles that are working for you to be moving around. Meanwhile, it needs to cool you down, and that's done with plasma, which is part of the blood. So your skin's like, no, I need it for sweat. And your muscles are like, no, I want it to be propelling you along. And then you've got then the gut going like, hey, what about me? And the brain going, oh, I could use a little here. So and that is that competition for precious bodily fluids, it can be deadly. So that's and it would be great if there were a way, like a blood marker or some genetic marker, to set us to take these people who are at risk and keep them out of really extreme heat exertion environments. So that was what I was doing there, and embarrassing myself in front of the 2 most fittest individuals I'd ever met.
And you learned something about heat tolerance, and always, of course, when Mary goes out on an assignment, she learns something, and that's what's fun about all of the gross, funny stories that she tells us. Is we always walk away and we learn something, and she is a master, or I guess a mistress, of arcane, beautifully rendered scientific facts. And for example, I was looking in your submarine section, and we'll get to that you pointed out that at 1,000 feet underwater, an 8-inch hole lets in an Olympic swimming pool of water in 3 minutes, which is something that you worry about if you're in a submarine.
Yes.
And you actually didn't just write about submarines or gloss over published submarine information in other places, but you went on a submarine, a nuclear submarine,
Yes.
which is no easy thing to do. How did that happen?
That was about 1.5 years of making an utter pest of myself with an individual up at the Naval Medical, NSMRL, Naval Submarine Medical Research Lab, and it was interesting, because first it was a matter of nobody was saying no, you can't go, but nobody knew who was the person who could say yes. So there was a lot of emails flying back and forth, like, well, are you the person that can say it? So finally there was some 2-star admiral somewhere who said, yeah, fine, let her go with her notebook and her stupid questions and make a pest of herself. And so that happened. But then, now that we had somebody who was in a position to say, this is okay by me, now we had to find the commanding officer of the submarine who was willing to say, oh yeah, that's going to be my boat. I want her, yeah. So that took a little time. It was it was over 1 year to finally get that approval. And how it happened was that there was a group of prospective commanding officers, submarine commanding officers, who were going out to meet a submarine and be on for I think it was 4 days, 3-4 days. And they had to do kind of a practical exam in essence. And so I would go on with them and come off with them, because a ballistic missile submarine, I mean, they go out for months. They've got a nuclear, what's useful about a nuclear power on a sub is you don't have to refuel. You can just stay out there. And what it is it's a roving arsenal. It's strategic deterrence. It's nobody knows where this is. It's silently kind of moving around. I never knew where I was. We went out 10 hours from Kings Bay, Georgia, in the middle of the night, and in the morning, in the middle of somewhere in the Atlantic, we're all standing around a deck, and this submarine pops up, and they lay down kind of almost like a gangplank. It's just sort of this, and you walk across down through the hole there, the hole, what is that? The conning tower, the down in, yeah. You go down in, and then it goes back down under, and away we went, where I do not really know. Which was really, really interesting. It was a chapter on sleep deprivation. They were trying a new watch schedule because it's been brutal on submariners because not only they've got way too much to do and not enough sleep, but somewhere along the line, the watch schedule created an artificial day, because there's no sunlight, so you can kind of make up your own day, but you can't really, because the body really wants a 24-hour circadian rhythm. It doesn't do well if you just kind of muck around with the day. So they were all jet lagged on top of being sleep deprived. So this particular submarine was trying a better, more circadian friendly watch cycle. So anyway, that's what I was doing. And what was amazing is that the missile silos are in 2 long rows. I think it's 12 on each row, and they're big. And because there's space in between them, some of the crew have taken to putting down a mattress, so some of them sleep in the missile compartment. So it's just very kind of it's if something were to happen, it would be like the most hectic, horrible, impossible to sleep place in the world. But if nothing's going on, it's the most quiet place on the submarine. It's very peaceful there, amid the amid the materials for Armageddon.
The nuclear war, yes, they want that to be quiet in there. You mentioned 1.5 years of getting permission to go on a submarine, which raises the question for us: how do you work? How long did you spend on this book?
About
traveling, reporting, researching, and writing.
2.5 years. Yeah, 2.5 to 3 years.
2.5 years of
a lot of delays and a lot of, as I was saying, a lot of pestering people and sometimes things. I would think that I wanted to embed. I thought that there were a couple of things I wanted to cover, like care in the air and medevacs and surgery on the wing and the Army blood system. There was a lot of things but I wasn't able to embed because it was during the drawdown, and there were very few embeds being supported, and I was turned down not by the U.S. but by ISAF, the coalition umbrella.
Okay.
So a lot of I thought I was doing that, but now I need to scramble and come up with something else. And sometimes just really naive things like I thought, well, perhaps I'll go out with the special operations guys, because my editor is like, readers like to read about special operations, like Navy SEAL guys, and like, why don't you go out with them? I'm like, Jill, I don't think so. But then I thought, well, what if I covered something like they have a weather arm? And I thought, well, that seems sort of, maybe those guys don't get any coverage. They don't get to write their memoir and have it turned into, Zero Dark 30. And like, though, if I could get like those guys to say, hey, yeah, you can come along. So I called the Strategic Operations Public Affairs Office, and I pitched this to them, and he said, this is all classified. And I said, yeah, but I'll only ask about weather. I'll only report on the weather. I won't even, I'll be like, la, 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 la.
Right.
So yeah, he's like, that's so not going to happen.
But right. But you did eventually encounter some special operations folks in Djibouti, if I recall, right? And it took some effort, and you had to kind of go rogue yourself in order to talk to them. And that was a kind of interesting scene in your book where you walk up to this clearly special operations guy in a cafeteria who's having lunch, and he thinks you're actually going to investigate him, but he decides in the end to talk to you about a really interesting and important subject. Which was
diarrhea. See, people laugh when you say diarrhea. Diarrhea is a funny word.
Yeah.
But if you were, say, on a mission to, along the lines of taking out Osama bin Laden, or I don't know what all the, if you're a sniper, if it's a small team and you've been, the thing is, special operations guys have the rates of diarrhea or the kind of infection that causes food poisoning, basically, or from bad water. They're twice as high because they're out in villages. They're out mixing with the local population in Somalia or wherever they are, and so they're getting hit with diarrhea a lot more often. And these missions, they're very small. You can't kind of go like, I'm feeling a little under the weather. Do you want to cover for me? Because you're one of 2 or 3 people going in, and so it seemed to me, and this is why I went to Djibouti, and I went with a diarrhea researcher who's in the back row. Mark Riddle, stand up. Captain Mark Riddle, ladies and gentlemen. And Mark Riddle deserves a medal because in order for me to go to Camp Lemonnier, I had to have an escort. And I thought that meant, somebody was going to kind of vouch for me. But what it meant was every waking moment of that week, Mark Riddle must be with you. So poor Mark Riddle had to be with me from the time in the morning when the Djiboutian national anthem played, which we could probably sing for you. We were going to play as I came on stage, the Djiboutian national anthem. Anyway, so Mark was doing a diarrhea clinical trial over there, testing like a single dose regimen, something that would get you back on your feet faster, get the diarrhea out of the way sooner. And but the other thing I needed to do while I was there, I really wanted to talk to some of these guys who've dealt with this. And the special operations folks are in the restricted zone. Is that what it's called? The restricted zone. Anyway, they're off on their own, and they only come out to eat because they don't have their own dining facility. So they only come out to eat. So the public affairs guy, Seamus, said to me, "Yeah, you're going to have to get them a dinner. They only come out. They only come out to eat," he said, "and to steal our women." So this, and you could tell these guys because they've got beards and I don't know, you look at them and you're like, that's one of them over there. They're not clean shaven. They have beards because they're blending in with the local population. So, Seamus, the PR guy, at one point goes, "There's your guy over in the corner." And I'm like, "You've got to come with me. You've got to introduce me," because he's got this kind of a awkward reporting challenge to go up to one of these guys and over dinner and broach the topic of diarrhea. So we did. We crossed the room, and as Seamus is like, "Oh, hello. Do you mind if I ask what line of work you're in?" And the guy goes, "I'm done." And he starts to pick up his tray, and he's like, "I'm leaving." And I launch into my hello. My name's Mary. I'm working on a book, and I actually have a chapter on diarrhea. And I know that diarrhea sounds like kind of a silly topic. And then he cuts me off, and he goes, "It's not. You're welcome to sit down." So it was a really interesting conversation.
Right, and he actually he underscored for you that this was a significant part of working in a field,
right?
And that it was something that they really had to cope with.
Yeah, exactly. And Seamus was trying to get we were trying to get him to tell a story, but of course all these missions are classified. And Seamus is going, "Can you give us the there I was?" Yeah. He's like, "No, I'm sorry, I can't give you that kind of detail. I don't know what you guys want from me. I've soiled my pants in Iraq. I've soiled my pants in Afghanistan. It's just how it is." So, and then at the end of it all, he apologized for having been kind of frosty. He said, and this was what was great, because this guy was so intimidating, and he goes, "I thought you guys were NCIS. Yeah. He said, "You scared me."
Right. Well, you're scary, scary.
Yeah. Anyway.
Well, I think that underscores a point too, because for all of the humor and the horsing around that we love Mary for, I was impressed that this book had some journalistic points to make that were kind of important and even a little bit urgent, And one place where that hit home for me was when you were at Walter Reed. And you were covering and reporting on operations that were being done there on men who had been seriously wounded in combat overseas. And you really kind of went out of your way to make some points about how, look, we've got to get over this, squeamishness that we have about some of these issues and take care of these men.
And you do have to too, because you're just like dancing all around. These were.
No, I'm setting you up.
Oh, all
I'm
right,
just
okay.
trying to set you up. These were men whose, she has a chapter on injuries to men who've been, harmed and had genitals, had
Yeah.
penises blown away and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So she was there to do a very serious piece of this overall work on how the military establishment needs to not only respond in a medical way, but in other ways too, to help these men
Right.
carry on in their lives.
Yeah. I spent time in the operating room because I was curious about sort of the techniques. Interestingly, some of the techniques are borrowed from the transgender surgical community. I mean, the techniques that have been learned through that world. This was a urethral repair, which was fascinating because they take to repair a urethra. You want first of all, it should be hairless. So like you could take the underside of the arm, but you want something that is used to moisture. So they were taking the inside of the cheek, a rectangle, and then that would be rolled into a tube, and that would be a kind of a patch for the urethra. And so that was part of it. But then afterwards, I was speaking to this woman, Christine Delorier, who is a nurse at Walter Reed and has taken it upon herself to do a fair amount of counseling in sexual health, sexual intimacy, and not just for veterans and soldiers with genital injury, but also a lot of the drugs that you end up being on when you have a severe injury. Antidepressants and painkillers, nerve stabilizers, they interfere with your sex life. And also amputees, if you're a double hand amputee or you're missing, a leg here, I mean, what kind of sexual positions? And there's answers and there's equipment and there's all kinds of resources, but nobody, there's not a person there whose job it is to have candid conversations and say, look, this is going to affect your marriage and this is important. And she's been frustrated. I said, is it a budget issue? Is it a priority issue? She said, a little bit budget, but it's also just getting the government to embrace sex as a something we can talk about and make a priority. And so, she was kind of heroic.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I got a real sense that you were really advocating for these men, in addition, and the people who care for them, in addition to just explaining what the processes
right.
are.
Yeah.
And there's a nice passage here that I loved reading. It's in a different chapter, but this represents for me the way that Mary sometimes sneaks in a really serious, important thought on top of the fun and games.
And the used tampons.
Right. You were talking. You were covering a guy named Josh. And you said who'd been overseas a lot fighting, and he was in one of your experiments that you wrote about, and you said he seems like a good person who has been handed a lot. His frivolity, his pep, whatever innocence we're all born with, became something tougher in Iraq. War denatures people. And that was a great play on an earlier passage you had about how heat denatures proteins, So there's a theme here about the consequences of battle and the consequences of sending men and women into battle on top of everything. Mm-hmm. And your closing chapter looks at that too. But was there something you wanted to say about that just regularly?
About what?
Well, your sense of what you took away from studying all these men and scientists who deal with men who've been injured.
I came at this book the way I come at all my books, with just sort of a just kind of nosing around, not really thinking about broader implications or the big picture. And I think that the time that I spent with the guy who was having his urethra repaired, I spoke to him afterwards, and just that, having a conversation was, I said, can you just tell me what happened? And he told the whole story about, from stepping on that pressure plate that set off an IED and, being blown in the air. And he was the he was the commander of a unit, and he the first thing, and you hear people say, oh, the first thing a soldier will say is my junk okay? And I said, I didn't ask him that question, but he said that, the first thing I did, I grabbed my tourniquet, the tourniquet that everybody carries. There's a couple of tourniquets around. I put that on. In the way he said it was, I looked down, I could see that my leg was missing, and I put on the left tourniquet. I mean, that was, just the matter of factness of saying I looked down and I could see that my leg was missing. But then the first thing he did was to, he tried to get up and say, who's hit, who's yelling, who's hurt, who's hit. And the medics had to kind of hold him down to keep him from trying to get up. And that was, I don't know, I've never had a conversation with somebody like that.
Right. And it comes through. There's a great deal of compassion and empathy in your book, in addition to the nifty science and the fun that you have. When you look at all the stuff that you learned in military science and so on, having studied the subject, is there some discovery or invention that you would wish for more than anything else at this point? Something that if you could make it happen?
Yes. Yeah. You know what I would love? There's a guy who's in the first chapter of the book who he actually does most of his work in bird strike and making jet canopies safer if a bird hits. But anyway, he participated in a brainstorming session for looking at novel non-lethal weapons. And one of the things in this paper, that brainstorming session was written up, one of them hit the press as the so-called gay bomb. Okay, and I when I finally tracked him down, his name had been redacted, but I sent actually handwritten letters around. I finally found him, and I said, so let me just get this straight. The idea was that that this would create sort of brotherly love for the enemy, and that you would no longer, that you'd have these. And he said, no, it was so you'd be worried that somebody's going to come in your foxhole and make advances at you. Anyway, so it's kind of like weaponized homophobia. But my version of it, there could be this compound that you would spray it over the battlefield, and suddenly people would go like, "What are we doing? We're all people. Let's all get together and just walk off the set. Come on." I don't know. That's what I want.
That sounds like a wonderful weapon to have, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Now, are we ready to take some questions from the audience?
Sure, but first I want to say I promised I have a giveaway, okay, for anybody who buys a book. This is the actual toilet paper from an MRE. This is single-serving toilet paper. I had little stickers that say Grunt, which I felt was sort of a nice double entendre. So I have a bunch of these, and they're made not far from where I live in the East Bay in California. So this is the actual goods that I bought. There's a minimum order of 2,000, so I got a lot of individual servings of toilet paper. So I'll be handing out the Grunt limited edition combat ration toilet paper.
Thanks, Mary, for talking with me.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. Okay, so let's see. How do you figure out the right people or things to research? That is really just kind of a popularity wars. Like what's going to be the most interesting, surprising, the most fun to report and read about? It's really just I have the luxury, because my books are not comprehensive treatments of any one topic, so I can kind of hop around and pick or choose, and I can say like, I'm going to Djibouti with Mark Riddle because that sounds really interesting. So that's how I do it. Okay. Do you notice different reactions to your books based on the format, e-reader, paper, audiobooks? Not so much e-reader versus paper, but what's interesting about audiobooks, people have very strong feelings about the readers on audiobooks. I will get people writing to me going, the person who read fill in the blank, I hated that person. I hated that person. So boring, or snarky, or something, and they think that I chose. I don't choose the person, but yeah, that's interesting. There's a lot of feeling behind it. I guess because you spend a lot of hours with this person, and if they aren't, if it or maybe if you have a sense of the when you read the book, you have a sense of the author, and then that clashes with the audiobook reader. Maybe, I don't know. Ideas for future books. Let's see. If money or reality wasn't an issue, what experiment, test, activity would you want to participate in? I would want to go over and over and over on research that involves me to be on one of those zero gravity flights. I just want to do that all the time. Huh? Yeah. Microgravity. Yeah, whatever. That simulated weightlessness. Let's see. Mary, thank you for acknowledging the dedication and commitment of those who conduct research to support the warfighter. You're welcome. Thank you for this. Thank you. And we can also raise hands. That's fine too. Have you researched or have any stories about animals being used in unusual roles during war? Yeah, they're not in the book, but I came across some very, probably some of you have heard about the bats that were used. They were bat incendiary bombs, and the idea was that you would put this little, and I'm doing this from a dim memory, you would attach this little, this was in Japan. The idea was that there'd be a little incendiary device on the bat. The bats would roost in these, some of the houses were wood and paper, yeah, and so the aim was that the bats would cause, but it didn't work, did it? Or did they even? I don't know. Anyway, the bats, yeah. I also saw someone suggesting, although I don't know that it was ever using the Coast Guard using owls because they have good night vision for looking for people lost at sea. Somehow training owls to look for people lost at sea. I thought that was interesting. Rin Tin Tin was a war dog. That book by Susan Orlean is wonderful about the original Rin Tin Tin. They were dogs in as a World War II, I guess. Was it World War I? World War I, thank you. Let's see. What is a lie your parents told you as a kid? Okay, that's a good one. Who said this? Thank you. Okay, my parents, they didn't really lie about this. I think they might not have known, but my parents, and this is in a footnote in Grunt, when a thermometer would break and the mercury would come out, they would scoop it up into a little margarine bowl and let my brother and me play with it. We'd just be like, "Whoa, look at that!" Yeah, that wasn't really a lie. It was just sort of an ignorance or something. I don't know. So maybe that explains something about me. Okay, let's. People want to raise hands?
Let me just bring you the microphone.
Okay.
Okay, my question is about people like SEAL Team 6. And I'm wondering if you've had anything to do with the amount of gung-ho behavior with people like this. Because if you read in Lone Survivor by Marcus Luttrell, you'll find that a whole helicopter full of people coming to rescue he and these three buddies got shot down because they were, so quick to respond. And that meant that the whole helicopter load, like about 24 or 28 people, died. Mm-hmm. Nobody got rescued either. Mm-hmm. So what I'm wondering about is, have you ever done anything about this idea of being too gung-ho?
No. I haven't.
New book.
New book. Yeah. No, I don't. I thought maybe if I reached way back, there was something I came across. Yeah. Interesting. To the idea of like how do you choose, like selecting for those, like the psychological screening. I think would be really interesting for that population, and how do you what exactly is the mix you're looking for? But I don't know what that. I don't know. Yeah. Good question though.
Hey, thanks for coming over here.
Yeah. Hi.
Hey, you talked a little bit about the delays that you experienced when you were writing the book.
Yeah.
And I was just curious how strongly your book resembles how you envisioned it when you did your book proposal.
Well, all of my books don't resemble my book proposals at all. The book proposal is like a joke. It's a pretend sales document. It's just like, yes, and I'll go here, and then I'll go there, and of course, I think I pitched it saying, I'm going to embed with the 5th Marine Corps Dental Battalion. They weren't going anywhere. But I just like the sound of that. I'm going to embed with the 5th Marine Corps Dental Battalion. So my proposals are always very far from the finished product. And a publisher doesn't really mind. As long as the final product is as good or better than what you pitched, they're fine. They don't really care, thankfully. Yeah.
I went to the Uniformed Services University and got my master's degree. And it was, I could not have gone there during the Vietnam War. I did not respect the military, but I found that they were among the brightest, most dedicated, incredible people I could ever have studied with, and it was wonderful. So this is on the serious side of your research. Is there anything going on in the military to study deterrence of war?
Again, another book. Yeah, bodies are my bag. I'm kind of, and are a bag. I don't know. I hope so. I hope so. Yeah.
Did you have an opportunity to observe the soldiers that have gone to Iraq and Afghanistan in training and the psychological stresses that they endure in the war?
The closest to that is that I spent time at a training session for Navy corpsmen who provide medical care for Marines, and one of the ways that they're trained is it's a simulated combat scenario, and they call it hyper realistic, and it is that there's pyrotechnics and there's dust hits that look like someone's actually firing. They have amputee actors with it's an old Hollywood studio where they used to do action films, and they've repurposed it, so there'll be a gore sleeve over someone's stump, and there's a backpack hidden with blood and a pump, and it's bleeding the way it would bleed, and the actor has control so that if the tourniquet is applied right, it will stop bleeding, and if it's not, then the actor will die. And it's really it's very intense. So because when you're in a stressful situation, the fight or flight mechanism isn't helpful for you. When you're not running away. If you're running away from something, it's great because your muscles are getting a lot of oxygen. But if you're trying to do something that requires fine motor skills and focus, the last thing you want is a big fight or flight survival stress response. So anyway, it makes it very hard for them, and they try to kind of give them an exposure. The theory is stress inoculation. I don't know how much I don't know how much it helps, but it certainly can't hurt. There's a chapter on that.
Barry, back here.
Oh, okay.
Okay, 2 questions. One was, if you had to choose among the services, which was the most interesting one? Army, Navy, Air Force?
Oh,
okay.
That is such a loaded question.
I know. And the second one is, what was the most interesting technology? And while you're thinking the problem with the bat bombs,
yes,
you talked about,
they
tended to return to their origin and blow them up.
Oh.
That was the problem with them. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
You didn't want them returning with the armed bombs.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So the second part was most interesting technology. Oh, yeah, I blocked from my mind the first one. Well, since we have Captain Riddle here, I'm going to have to go with Navy. Just for him. Yeah, so did you, yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering, in your research, what do you feel is the most important, underappreciated technology that has been developed for the military?
Underappreciated technology. Something like, here's something that's huge, and not just in the military, but in civilian. It was developed by a Navy captain, Phillips, who he's the one who he figured out that if you add glucose to rehydration fluids for somebody who has severe dysentery or diarrhea, that they can then absorb enough of the liquid absorb it better. So you could drink these fluids rather than making your way to a clinic and getting set up with an IV. So the number of lives saved. Was it in Lancet that this was described as possibly the biggest, the most life-saving breakthrough of that century? Yeah, I mean, huge, just huge, and that's something that it's just a bag of liquid. So you really think about that being a huge life-saving technology, but it was. Yeah.
I have a question I've been just dying to know for years. How do you keep track of your expenses and do your taxes?
Yeah. You know what? This is kind of embarrassing. I have a folder that says tax expenses, and I throw everything in. It drives my tax guy. He wants everybody to be doing the Excel version, et cetera, and I'll have him snail mail me the worksheet, and he'll go, "Okay, that's coming right over on the Pony Express." So yeah, I throw it in a folder, and then I have a miserable 2 days around tax season where I pull everything together and do that. So that's I'm a little old timey. Yeah.
Hi. In your research for this book, compared to your research for Packing for Mars, did you find any similarities or differences in the challenges facing, like, food and waste for, like, astronauts going to space and the military?
Well, there's a lot of cross-pollination between for food between NASA and the military, because it's food that NASA. It's got to be very long shelf life, super long shelf life. I mean, the Natick Labs has sandwiches that last 30 years. I don't know, it's not 30. They last an amazingly long time. So there's definitely overlap with food. And what was the other? Waste. Not some. Well, the food, with NASA, the food was designed, especially early on when the space capsules didn't have toilets or bathrooms. You just had a baggie. You had a fecal bag. So the food was designed to constipate you. It was very highly processed because you did not want. No one wanted to use the bag, and I could go into more detail on the bag, and I won't because I've put you people through enough. but yeah, there are some but waste, yeah, it's a very high tech engineering issue, zero gravity waste management. Not so much, we have this for the military, yeah, and it's not a whole lot, but it's not a lot of toilet paper. But I have to say, I've seen the specifications for government toilet paper. It's very, very strong. The tensile strength is amazing. It's not scented or embossed, but it's very strong. So.
Hi. Thank you so
Hi.
much for making science so much fun for us non-science majors. I was just wondering if you could read a passage from your book.
Oh, okay. All right. Maybe we'll end on that. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Yeah. Okay. This is actually set at the Armed Forces Medical Examiner System, and I was getting a tour of this very large, sadly large autopsy room. In the autopsy room, there's a pair of platformed aluminum step ladders on wheels. I thought that the ceiling was being repaired. No, that's for perspective, Stone said. That's the public affairs guy, Paul Stone. That's for perspective, Stone had said. The autopsy photographers need to get up high to get the whole body in the frame. I guess war is like that, 1,000 points of light, as they say. Only when you step back and view the sum, only then are you able to grasp the worth, the justification for the extinguishing of any single point. Right at the moment, it's tough to get that perspective. It's tough to imagine a stepladder high enough. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks a lot.